Hey guys, want to do a modern tactical Nessmuk trio. People really kind of like the Nessmuk trio video I did a couple weeks ago, just remaking the old system that Nessmuk had with modern knives and hatchets and all that. So I wanted to do kind of an even more updated and do the tactical version. I thought it would be a little more modern to do something that not only will be handy in a wilderness situation, but also handy in an urban environment as well. So here we go. Started out, of course, Nessmuk said the most important part of his kit was his hatchet. He chose a double bit hatchet, small, lightweight, short-handled, He was a tiny little guy, so he wanted something small and handy that he could use for gathering firewood and camp chores. And, well, in that spirit, I wanted something that would not only be handy in some light firewood gathering and camp chores, but also something that can be used in an urban environment for kind of escape and breaching and things like that. So I chose this SCX4. It's small, pretty lightweight, one-piece design with the hardened steel handle. It's got the nice sharp pick at the back. I thought this would be a good balance of something you could use to gather kindling and make firewood, but also something you'd use to bust into doors, pry things open, you name it, in the urban environment, for that kind of survival situation, if you want to see it that way. I'm sure there's better choices out there, but what I have, some of the other tomahawk style things I had, I was a little worried about, like the Cold Steel Trench Hawk with that connection. He would have, I think, preferred something that was one piece and a little tougher to break. He wouldn't want to worry about breaking a handle, whereas this is a hardened steel core handle wrapped, or not wrapped, with kind of rubber molded over it. So a little tougher design, and I think this would fit his needs very well. Next we'll move on to the folding knife. Nessmuk used a moose pattern folding knife. He basically chose it saying it was basically the toughest one he could find. And he didn't seem to put a lot of emphasis on it being such an important piece of gear. It was really something more for whittling and camp chores and just ordinary use. All his tough use went to his hatchet. So, with that in mind, I chose this Bird Cara. Now, why did I choose this? Kind of an odd choice, I know people are going to say. Number one, it's a lockback. I think Nessmuk would really appreciate the lockback being very tough and robust and not as easy to break as, say, a liner lock or maybe a frame lock where you got to worry about that piece of the frame breaking. So I chose this. I chose it for another reason as well. It is a chisel ground blade. So as you can see, there's only one side that has that secondary bevel there to sharpen, plus it's partially serrated. I think in the urban environment, having something partially serrated to cut through synthetic materials, seat belts, nylon, stuff like that is important. Plus you still have your normal end for anything delicate you may need to cut. This can also be used as a defensive weapon. It's got a really nice handle to it, and really good. This is something that definitely is sharp enough to stab, slice. Could be very handy in a defensive situation on top of, your normal urban environment. Plus in the woods, these chisel grinds, they carve pretty good. They make feather sticks and all that, just as good as anything else. Plus, I think they're a little easier to sharpen. And you have those serrations. If you dull the knife up, those serrations stay sharper a lot longer. So, some of the reasons I picked that little guy. Now the folding knife. Nessmuk had his own design for a folding knife, and he chose his own design based on the idea that his folding knife was primarily used for processing game and eating. He actually used his knife as something that he could eat with, so he had it designed for that. Back then, Nessmuk would have never dreamed of battalion wood with this knife or doing a lot of the hard chores that we do with knives, because let's face it, back then they didn't have the the quality and manufacturing that we have now. Those knives probably just couldn't take it, versus modern knives can. But in that spirit, I didn't want to throw a big Becker or something like that into the mix, because his opinion was that he wanted, you know, a medium-sized blade, something that was thin so that you could full flat grind, something that would come to a really, really sharp edge without a lot of work. He kind of felt Bowie knives were big and clumsy. He wanted something a little more delicate that he could work with when it came to doing game. So it was tough to fit the bill with this, and a knife that would be suitable for processing wild game and light camp chores, and also something that would be useful in an urban environment for defense. And looking through the collection, I decided on this SOG Team Leader. You know, it's made of Voss-8 steel, which is okay. You know, it's not the best, but it is full flat grind in the spirit of what he liked. It's got a little bit of belly of it, so it'll be very good for slicing, help a little bit with processing game. It's got the drop point, which would be good for making those nice kind of drop cuts when it comes to cutting meat or slicing meat. Also, you know, the drop point is good in a defensive situation. It is something you can easily stab with and slice with, so I think this is a knife that fits that bill. You could definitely use it defensively, as well as using it to process game and all that. You could do some carving with this. You could do some whittling. You know, Nessmuk didn't use his knife for that at all. That's what he used his little knife and his hatchet for. This is merely pretty much a utensil to him, and he used to eat off the back. You know, he would basically use that as a spoon. I also chose this because it is a full tang design, which I think would be really important to him, not to have any kind of rat tail tang or a hidden tang knife, because it just wouldn't be as stout as this. As you can see, it's, you know, full tang with the rubber grips screwed onto it. If you were to break these grips, you could literally just, you know, wrap some cord around this, or duct tape, or even, you know, a piece of your shirt, and still have a nice handle for this. And even if the handle does fall off, this knife is still usable as it is. You know, a little paracord lanyard hole for the back. But I think this is something that's tough, rugged, simple design that he would use, because it fit that need. Now, of course, there's better knives out there. There's better steel out there. But given my collection and what I own, this is what I chose. I didn't, you know, being Nessmuk was so against the Bowie style knives, the bigger knives, I wanted to make sure it was something small, lightweight, agile, that could be used for primarily skinning, gutting, you know, stick with the flat grind, you know, plus have that little bit of a defensive, you know, feel to it as well. So I wanted to make sure in an urban environment, this is a knife that would do fairly well. I didn't want to go too far off the beaten path of that and pick something with a Tonto edge or something like that, because I think it defeats the purpose. You really do want that nice sharp drop point for when it comes to dealing with game. How many times, you know, you go in and you're cutting at something really small with that tip, you know, like the tendons, trying to free something loose. So I think it's a good choice. So there you go, guys. My modern tactical Nessmuk trio. I know it's not all the best, but it's inexpensive. It's all lightweight, rugged, tough stuff, and will suit you well in both environments.